That means our conference is about to start in 2 minutes.
好，欢迎各位回来这个下午的会议的议程啊。口语老师如果可以的话，帮我开始进行。那有一些注意事项。
There are some things we want to inform you before we start our session. First of all,
用餐哈，今天有提供午餐跟晚餐。
We do offer lunch and
用餐
dinner.
的部分呢，因为我们是跟这边的餐厅做合作，
And
所以
since
呢，
we
在
are
酒精
working
性饮料
together with the restaurant here,
还
so
有其他的酒精性饮料，那个部分
in
是
regards
需要
of
自费
beer
的。
and
那在这里边
alcohol
跟大家做一个说
drinks,
明。
you have to pay for
For the 2-day conference, we have prepared dinner and lunch for free if you hold your pass, VIP pass, but beverage with alcohol is not included. But if you really want, I'm sure you can talk to myself.
Right.OK， 第二件事情还是提醒各位，我们这个是有网络直播啊，我们整个会议的议程是有网络直播。那在会议的过程里头，如果您的手机能够关静音或震动，那我们会非常感谢你的合作，谢谢。
And again, we are doing live broadcasting on the internet, so please turn off your cell phone or switch it to vibration mode.
OK， 我们马上要准备开始了。目前的升降幕这样是对的吗？这样是对的。
Makakatawa rin makaida. Nakaraw matas ko ba dato mo?
Kadua tau pang kotis tu punya ni. Ye sak itu banyak orang. Oh ni pici cindak menyiman.
Dababatian la. Data.
Ko jinda rapahan. Ini ko jinda.
And we are here. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the lunch break. Next, we have prepared a special treat. Indigenous peoples, especially in Taiwan, are talented musicians. And the Bunu people from the mountain have a unique tradition called Bashibutbut, which is essentially 8 people singing in harmony. Let's welcome Ulu Bunu musical group from Taiwan's Bubu community. No, it's just for me. The prime director say I'm too short. Wow, the conference room is big. Oh, you're here. Next, we will welcome our next speaker, Sean LaRose from APTN. Mr. LaRose is the First Nation citizen from the Abenaki First Nation of Odanak. He was named Chief Executive Officer of APTN in November 2002. Since his appointment, he has brought the network from a deficit position of more than $5.5 million to a surplus position. The network has moved to a digital, high-definition platform and now employs over 130 people. Let's welcome Mr. LaRose to speak for us for the APTN's road to the 2010 Olympic Winter Games in Vancouver. Thank you. Do you need my suitcase?
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction, Pataka. It is with great pleasure that I bring greetings and good wishes from our First Nations, Inuit, and Métis territories in Canada to our most esteemed hosts, Sylvia Fang, Masawaki, the Taiwan Broadcasting System, including Taiwan Indigenous Television and Taiwan Public Television Services, the Austronesian peoples of Taiwan, the city of Taitung, and to all of you, my fellow Indigenous Television Broadcast Network partners. I would also like to recognize the presence of the acting chair of APTN, Mr. Dan Vandel. Dan. Who is with us, as you just saw, is with us today, as well as the presence of the senior managers of APTN, Vera Hull, Peter Strutt. Where's Peter? He went to hide. Okay. We'll remember that for the next appraisal. And also Patrice Mousseau, who is a host reporter with APTN. It is indeed my honor to once again be invited to speak at this most auspicious gathering, the second ever World Indigenous Television Broadcasting Conference. To be in the company of individuals so dedicated to preserving and sharing our Indigenous languages, cultures, and histories with the world is truly inspiring. It is my hope that the message I share with you today will serve to fuel your enthusiasm and, in turn, inspire each of you in your pursuits to bring the very best in Indigenous television to the world. Canada's Aboriginal Television Network celebrated its 10th anniversary in September 2009. This anniversary was a great and significant milestone for the network that started out as little more than a hope and a prayer. And although there have been many firsts and periods of impressive growth during this period, APTN has now successfully realized what has become its most fantastic journey. Its designation as the world's first Indigenous official broadcaster of the Olympic Games. From February 12 to 28 of this year, 2010, APTN, as a member of the CTV Olympic Broadcast Consortium, delivered approximately 14 hours a day of live, high-definition coverage of the Vancouver 2010 Olympic Winter Games in a total of 10 languages, including 8 Aboriginal languages, which were Cree, Ojibwe, Oji-Cree, Dene, Inuktitut, Mohawk, Mi'kmaq, and Michif, as well as English and French to all of Canada. This was, as you can imagine, no easy feat and was 4 years in the making.
Welcome to Games headquarters at the Aboriginal People's Television Network, home base for our historic coverage in 10 languages. Hello, I'm Rick Harp, or as we say in Cree, Tanse, Rick Harp and Tisikasan. I'm here with my colleagues Mike Beauregard and Charles Clément over the next 17 days as 2,700 athletes from 72 countries compete for medals. We'll bring you all the action in English, French, and 8 Aboriginal languages. That's a Canadian and world first for these Olympic Games, and it's why we believe you're about to see and hear the best coverage anywhere.
Cross country, ini pa ako dan bagi bagi pa ako sa dito yung kasama. Kaya ko teo pega sa mina ganito.
The pound mata is the pandemic.
We walked away with almost tears in our eyes.
Richard Wonder ne ni sanod me ranya tanong hawi.
Finally, I get to combine my two great passions, my love of sport and my pride as an Aboriginal.
Well, it's a fantastic day for a ski race here in Whistler and a fantastic day for Bodie Miller from the United States.
The athletes are the best in the world. The stories are the best in the world.
Upeng nakapunga.
Gaxganex yagirakwaratne yunkisata asuntanka garakwa.
Algerdi wakwani.
Nin gedlam sadasi.
Dewa dekwa.
Manitoki wichi banan.
Enjotmo ti temeo.
Kigas kitanan.
Kitebo etam nagin.
Je pense que le tournoi a réussi là, à atteindre nos attentes, le tournoi.
Oui, effectivement, on a simplement tapé champion de la cour.
International experience, she won't be the favorite.
No, she's never won a Scotty.
To be asked to come and talk to millions of people throughout the world is an honor.
It's really empowering.
Young Aboriginals see this, and they see what some of their elders have managed to do. They're going to say, hey, I can do that. Why can't I do that?
Language is the essence of our culture. If it's utilized, then our young people begins to see the value of it. That way that language will survive.
I'm probably going too fast with this. There we go. By the way, all the footage you saw in this clip was actually taken from what we had on air. So this was all elements of what people enjoyed for over 2 weeks. As an Aboriginal network, APTN includes programming by and from First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, as well as Indigenous programming from around the world. Through its efforts to develop Aboriginal talent, the network has contributed significantly to the growth and overall increased capacity of the Aboriginal production community across the country. APTN producers very skillfully provide unique and relevant program that doesn't just meet, but exceeds industry standards while staying true to the network's mandate to share the stories of our peoples. APTN currently broadcasts across Canada through 3 regional feeds and an HD channel. Broadcasting in English, French, and at least 15 different Aboriginal languages, APTN now offers the broadest slate of programming for Aboriginal peoples and Canadian audiences it has ever achieved. The network's on-air schedule continually provides a unique and highly accessible window to Aboriginal traditions, languages, arts, music, sports, history, and the different news affecting our communities. APTN programming has been celebrated internationally through numerous award recognitions. For example, the much-heralded documentary Club Native was recently honored with the Gemini Canada Award, which recognizes excellence in mainstream television programming, best reflecting the racial and cultural diversity of Canada. Club Native is a documentary that looks deeply into the history and present-day reality of Aboriginal identity. The CTV APTN co-production of the made-for-TV movie Elijah also received multiple Gemini recognitions, taking home awards for Best TV Movie and Best Writing in a Dramatic Program or Miniseries. Elijah also received nominations for Best Original Music Score for a Dramatic Program, Miniseries, or TV Movie, and for Best Sound in a Dramatic Program. Not to be undone, the stop-motion animation series Wapoos Bay, a perennial favorite with our youth audiences, was again nominated for Gemini Honors in 2009, as was the APTN comedic newcomer, Caution May Contain Nuts. And they do contain nuts. The network has also delved into the realm of live production and has staged 3 annual Aboriginal Day live shows. A national live broadcast featuring high-profile Aboriginal musical talent from 2 stages held to mark Aboriginal Solidarity Day in Canada on June 21st each year. As a mandated service, APTN is available to approximately 10 million Canadian households and commercial establishments with cable, direct-to-home satellite, telco-delivered, and fixed wireless television service providers. Currently, APTN employs over 150 people, with 71% of them being of Aboriginal descent.
In high definition. Breathtaking visuals. Exhilarating sound.
Is that clear? Crystal.
With programming for every demographic. Starting with our youngest crowd, APTN Kids is a fun and wonderful learning environment that parents love too.
Yeah, tell us of your dreams, and I'll tell you what it means.
Oh, joy!
It's a lot of fun. Our laugh out loud comedies always pack a punch.
What kind of Cree woman are you? Can't even play a decent game of bingo?
It's like her voice is making love to my ears.
This is not finished, you know.
I wish I had more ears.
I'm always getting this little flip too on here. What am I doing wrong? Am I releasing it too high?
You're actually releasing a little too soon, actually.
That's, that's the story of my life right there.
Our documentaries will leave you spellbound with visually brilliant scenes and stories from around the world.
Yeah, you know what? I'm building, my spirit keeps getting built and fortified and strengthened for the long journey ahead.
Hello, everybody. You're about to hear one of the most exciting acts in a long, long time. Her name is Crystal Shawanda.
APTN's award-winning dramas always have our viewers coming back for more.
So we're clear, intern? This is my love shack. You just sleep here.
I've seen him too.
Look out! He's in me! Get him out! He's in me! Get him out!
You know, my dad always says that everything's gonna be okay. And I always used to believe that. But I don't anymore.
Learn how to improve your overall health with our lifestyle programs.
We work not to battle disease, but to create health.
They won't say it, but I see a lot of doubt, like what the hell did I get myself into?
But the best thing about Fishing Lake Lodge is that it has its own private runway.
With 11 bureaus from coast to coast to coast and a state-of-the-art HD studio, APTN National News is at the front lines with news that not only informs, but inspires.
This day will help us to put that pain behind us.
And APTN HD is the place for stellar event coverage.
APTN is coming to you live from beautiful Yellowknife in high definition.
I'm sorry.
The difference is clear. Clearer sound.
I know there's a phone on here somewhere. I think this is it. No, I just took a picture of my ear. Gross.
Clearer images. Clearly, the way television was made to be experienced.
And that's the rule of the universe. Stamp, stamp, no erases.
In this section, I want to deal with the what we call the road to the games. I hope that this gave you an idea of what our network has accomplished. Now I'd like to talk about what has perhaps been one of APTN's greatest accomplishments in its very young 10-year history. Its designation as an official broadcaster to the Vancouver 2010 Olympic Winter Games. I'll start at the beginning. In their bid to secure broadcasting rights to the Vancouver 2010 Olympic Winter Games, Canadian broadcasters CTV and Rogers Media joined together to offer the world the most comprehensive coverage of an Olympics game ever achieved in history. Known as the Canadian Olympic Broadcast Media Consortium, they took a different approach to televising the games, one that would be an all-encompassing, not only utilizing the best in today's technologies and multiple formats, but also providing unique, diverse, and culturally sensitive content. Early in the process, the consortium identified the importance of including language programming in its broadcast strategy. Initially, the focus was on the languages of many of Canada's new immigrants. However, thanks to the relationship APTN had built with the multi-language broadcaster Omni TV, it became clear that this language mandate would need to include a Canadian Indigenous component, particularly considering that the official Olympic Charter encourages and supports initiatives blending sport with culture and education. It was then that the consortium partner Omni TV approached me to see if APTN, Canada's only national Aboriginal broadcaster, was interested in taking part. Specifically, at the beginning, they only offered us to broadcast the opening and closing ceremonies in Aboriginal languages. There was no doubt that APTN was interested, but we wanted more than token inclusion. We believed that we could be full partner in the consortium and could deliver live event coverage in a variety of Canadian Aboriginal languages. APTN's reach across Canada from coast to coast to coast, and its already proven ability to broadcast in multiple languages made it a strong candidate, as did its ability to reach a large national French population, something the other broadcasters lacked. Initially, the consortium was hesitant, but APTN persisted and made a pitch to provide 10 hours of coverage per day, 4 hours in English, 4 hours in French, and 2 hours in Aboriginal languages. Through hours of discussion and presentations, I appealed to the consortium president, Keith Pelly. even leveraging APTN's capacity to reach Canada's largest French audience in exchange for its inclusion in a broadcast of the 2012 London Olympic Summer Games. Mr. Pelly was interested.
My name is Keith Pelly. I'm the president of Canada's Olympic Broadcast Media Consortium, and so I oversee all facets of the 2010 and the 2012 games for the consortium. Any time you have the games in your own country, it's special. And there's no question that the competition was fierce going up against CBC, who did a very good job as the incumbent. And so the CTV and Rogers came together, and then they brought in great partners like APTN and ATN and made the bid so powerful and so strong that really the IOC really only had one choice to make. When we first got together, there was an immediate connection. We were quickly pulling on the same rope, understood what the goal was, understood the magnitude of the project, and understood the opportunity for both of us. And that's what a real partnership is, when it's a win-win on both sides. And there are people that watch APTN that don't watch the other networks. And to take 2 hours of the main event and broadcast that in an Aboriginal language is fantastic. Never been done before, and it really shows the commitment to bring these games to all Canadians, and we could only do that with partners like APTN. What we did with APTN has never been done before, but it'll live with APTN forever. And that is a benefit to all Canadians. Not just in broadcasting, but in life. In all businesses, you look for partners that over-deliver, that embrace the partnership and understand it. And they have in spades. APTN has been fantastic. They've always been there, and they took a small arrangement that we had and made it as big as they possibly could. And we'll be forever grateful.
Once APTN's status was secured, the real work started. How could we make this happen? And who could help us do it well? And more importantly, how the heck were we going to pay for this? After all, we were looking at $2.5 million to finance this undertaking. Our initial focus was then to tightly control our expenditures for 2 years to build cash reserves to accomplish this. I'll speak more on this a little later. But the focus immediately was placed on putting together a dedicated APTN Olympic management team. Based on previous experience working together at the Canada Winter Games in early 2008, sports event coverage veteran Doug Howe was hired as APTN's Olympic team executive producer. It was Doug's responsibility to put together a broadcast team that would include external professionals as well as current APTN staff. We also needed tight financial controls to ensure we remained within budget, and we met APTN's board direction that we not go over budget on this process. APTN's former CFO, Wilf Blondet, was hired for this project. It was also imperative to recruit professionals who had the expertise to make this enormous undertaking happen properly. While it was equally imperative that these professionals have the ability to additionally mentor, train Aboriginal staff from APTN for the project and understand the cultural elements that would make APTN's coverage unique and respectful of our people's identities and languages. With the people in place, APTN began to plan the physical and technological needs of the project. By sheer coincidence, the building next door to APTN headquarters in Winnipeg vacated. This allowed the network to negotiate a takeover of the space to accommodate the construction of a new Olympic studio, complete with edit suites, control rooms, voiceover booths, meeting rooms, and administrative offices. Meanwhile, a working relationship was established between APTN marketing staff and the CTV Consortium communications team. As a member of the consortium, we learned that there were many restrictions related to the promotion of our involvement in the Games, particularly in regard to the Olympic brand, probably one of the most tightly controlled brands in the world. In time, APTN's scheduling department was tasked with providing the time slots required to accommodate the live feeds, tape coverage, pre- and post-shows. No easy task considering that APTN has 3 distinct regional broadcast feeds as well as its high-definition channel. APTN's creative services team also went full gear designing all on-air creative elements and producing teaser vignettes, promotions, and content with APTN's Kids Club host, Cassidy. Many technological upgrades were also implemented by APTN's operations crew during the Olympic broadcasts, and APTN's master control was totally upgraded in 2008 with a completed conversion to full high-definition technology being completed in 2009. The APTN National News and Current Affairs team dedicated 4 crews, including 21 staff from across Canada, to broadcast the latest news stories about the Games from a temporary bureau in Vancouver. APTN National News focused on Olympic-related coverage, including cultural stories, trade shows, guest interviews, and the economic impact of the Games on First Nations communities. It goes without saying the preparations required for APTN's designation as an official broadcaster were immense and involved many people, resources, and a strong financial commitment. But perhaps the most impressive story of APTN's journey to the Games involved its pledge to broadcasting event coverage in Aboriginal languages. After all, that was the reason we were doing this. Never before have Olympic events or televised sports in general been called by someone speaking an Aboriginal language in Canada. Having committed to broadcasting live event play-by-play coverage in Cree, Ojibwe, Ojibwe, Mi'kmaq, Dene, Inuktitut, Michif, and Mohawk, APTN was tasked with finding individuals who were first and foremost fluent in their language. They also preferably had to have some broadcast experience. This was a very difficult undertaking and in the end involved recruiting some individuals who possessed no broadcast experience at all. In fact, one of the couples who you saw in the video earlier are 2 elders. They're a couple. They're in their 70s. They've never done anything like this before. And they chose to do the figure skating. And they did an amazing job. Some of the elders who were listening to them said that they've never heard a sport called in a way that was relevant to their language, their culture, that brought the sport to an element that was very human, very sensitive to them. And that was what it was all about. To address this, APTN hired veteran sportscaster Jim Van Horn to train and mentor our Aboriginal language announcers. Through 2 in-depth training sessions and pre-show rehearsals, our announcers received instruction on the fine points of sports broadcasting. But then a more serious issue was identified. What could you do when there were few words in the language for sports terminology? How could you talk about hockey or curling if no such words exist? After all, the luge and curling are not traditional sports to Canada's Aboriginal peoples. The answer lay in the Aboriginal communities. Once the troublesome words were identified, each announcer was tasked to return to his or her community for discussions with elders and fellow community members. Wording, expressions were then developed and brought back to APTN for use in the Olympic broadcasts. Through this endeavor, APTN has played a very small part in ensuring that our languages are expanded and continue to grow. A language is a living language as long as it evolves with time and circumstances. APTN's goal is to ensure that all we can do to ensure our languages are always evolving and remain strong is part of our mandate.
We are training to become Olympic commentators for the 2010 Winter Olympics.
We had to put together a plan to find people who, A, were fluent in their language, B, had some broadcasting experience, and C, had hopefully worked in sports.
Okay. Hearing me. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Alan Adamadia is in Doon John. I've been, like a broadcaster before, and done a lot of live events, but never an Olympic event.
Some of the challenges that we're going to encounter is the fact that there are a lot of terms in the different sporting events that don't necessarily have a traditional native word for certain things.
And that's the difficult part. How do you display excitement in an area that the words are so foreign?
Because our languages are very descriptive.
Describe puck, and that's it's ojihkwa, and it's actually the buttons on your shirt.
I could describe what's going on the ice in my own language, in my own concept and thoughts.
We will be the first to do it in our language, create almost an industry in the scope of months, where the rest of the world has had decades to do. We have weeks.
That's what we've got to do to shorten the words so that they fit better into commentating.
You're
going to have to improvise as you go along.
The challenge here is to become part of the event.
How am I, as an Anishinaabe Kwe, speaking in the Ojibwe language, going to take that message out there and take it to that next level?
We are hoping that with this historic event, we'll be making history.
This is like big news. This is Aboriginal people having a chance to describe to their people in their own language what's going on at the Olympics. I think that's exactly what we dreamt about when we saw the network happening.
People who are doing the training are creating history, and it's a huge step forward for our peoples and for our languages and our cultures. Finally, the cost of funding this initiative was substantial for a small network like APTN. The budget was $2.5 million. 3 years ago, when I knew we would be broadcasting the games, I asked senior management team and all of our employees to work with us and find ways to cut some of our costs and spend money to save the money for this initiative. Together, we saved this amount through a variety of ways, some very small, some not so small. From using teleconference and video conference to hold meetings and save on travel, to travel using only seat sales or low-cost airlines, as well as through maintaining equipment that was still serviceable instead of replacing it, such as computers, when it was only necessary. Everything counted, and staff was great at finding new and innovative ways to save money to allow APTN to pay for this initiative. Through this effort, money was saved, and the entire Olympic project was funded from staff savings without impacting our normal operations or our programming budget, which is the heart of our network. As you can see, this project was an immense and very ambitious undertaking. APTN was one of the 12 networks within Canada's Olympic Broadcast Media Consortium, as well as 19 official radio stations, a national print publication, 2 dedicated websites, which together provided Canadians with an unprecedented 4,800 hours of multilingual, multi-platform coverage of the Games. As a first for our network, there are things that we have identified that we will do better next time around. But overall, our experience in broadcasting the Olympic Games was a resounding success. It was to our elders, it was to our young people. We have received more communications from our audience on these 3 weeks than we have had for years on some of our regular programming. People were touched, people were amazed, but especially people were very, very grateful to hear their languages describing an event such as the Olympics. So my message to you as fellow Indigenous broadcasters is this: you will have the same opportunities when the Olympic Games come to your countries. What is important to remember is how APTN leveraged its inclusion through an existing Olympic mandate. The International Olympic Committee has given itself a directive that they must award the Games to a given country, and that country must give reflection to the Indigenous peoples of that land. In the lead up to the 2010 Games in Vancouver, VANOC used that mandate to create a relationship with the 4 host First Nations. And the games actually took place on the traditional territories of 4 of our nations. Because of this, members of the consortium felt that APTN's inclusion was a big element towards securing their bid and gaining the rights to broadcast the games. This gave us a good position to get a deal that we could afford, but it had to be full inclusion, no tokenism. We had to have a place that would provide Aboriginal peoples the opportunity to shine and show everyone that we were full-fledged partners, not afterthoughts. I think that the approach APTN used is also relevant to all of you. I encourage you to consider that opportunity or a similar one should it ever arise in your country. And remember to use that IOC statement, present the case for coverage approach that you can do and you can afford, then just go out there and show the world you can do it. And remember, we at APTN will always be there to answer any questions you may have about our path to the Olympics. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Sean. I'm not sure if Winter Olympic will come to Taiwan, because even if it's winter, it's still Canada's summer. Our next speaker is Donald Campbell, a native speaker born in the island of South Uist. Mr. Campbell joined MG Alaba, the Gaelic Media Service, as Chief Executive in July 2006, having previously served as a member of the board as Chief Gaelic Programs. As your... Okay. Okay, we have to have Mr. LaRose to come back to the stage. I think we have a QA session for you. You can have me back.
Thank you. So this is a surprise. I wasn't aware that there was a Q&A session, but I guess then my point is, do any of you have any questions or any comments or observations following the APTN's presentation?
Kia ora, John. Fantastic to see what you achieved, and to see the kaumātua, the elders, using their language and reviving the old words and trying to apply it to the modern sport. But my question now is, how do you harness that? What are you going to do with what you've developed with those 20-odd Indigenous broadcasters in the 8 different languages? What's the future?
Well,
how do you develop that further?
That's exactly the challenge we face now. One of the things we did secure was the right to the Summer Games in 2012. So I guess the bad news for staff is I have to squeeze them for 2 more years. The good news is we will probably get to cover the Olympics in 2012. The goal is to use a lot of those same commentators in 2012 and also hopefully add some others. But another important part of what we have done here is that all of the individuals that we hired that you saw there, the elders and others, part of the agreement we have with them is they have to write all the words they develop or the expressions and define them. We will take that and we will take those dictionaries, or glossaries or lexicons, whatever term we'll give them, and we will farm them out to those communities or those education systems where they teach the language, that language. We will also be sharing it with the federal government, the Department of Heritage, that is responsible for the Aboriginal languages, so that they can also more broadly share them. So the goal out of this was twofold: to create new words, but to make sure they get used in the community down the road. And we're going to be sharing that with those communities and hopefully bring those people and more back in 2012 for the Summer Games in London.
Kia ora.
Thank you. I'd like to say congratulations on behalf of National Indigenous TV in Australia. I just think I was a young journalist during the 2000 Olympics in Australia, and we actually ripped off from the television and broadcast in radio in languages across the country. To be actually included within the broadcast is just amazing, and something that is I would like NITV to aspire to. My question is, did you actually get commercials, and what sort of rights did you make money on this broadcast?
Actually, no, we didn't make any money, and we didn't expect to make any. The agreement we had with the consortium is, and this is where the deal in many ways was very sweet to us, it cost them $150 million to get the rights. It cost me nothing. In exchange, my airtime during the Olympics became their airtime. So when they sold, as an example, ads to GM, that ad went on the 12 broadcast partners. All the money went to the consortium, CTV, because they had paid for the rights. But what it has done, it has, for the first time ever in the history of APTN, brought viewers to the network that never came there before. When you have 40,000 people watching I think it was the luge in, I think the luge was either in Mohawk or OG Cree, you know that there are not 40,000 OG Cree speakers in mainstream Canada. There just aren't any. That means that 40,000 Canadians who don't speak the language tuned it to watch it, even though they couldn't understand it. And to me, that is part of what our partnership in this meant to me. It meant that we became part of the greater body politic of Canada. It made people pay notice to us, if only through that sport, and realize that we are there and we are part of that society, whether they wish to see it or not. And I think that made a huge difference, because a lot of Canadians who did right after and they clearly identified themselves as non-Aboriginal people, they said that what amazed them the most was to hear the language, because A, they'd never heard it before, B, they never thought they would hear it in something like this, and C, they thought it was amazing to watch it, listen without understanding, but trying to visualize or make believe what was being described by watching it. So all in all, I think we may have broadened some minds across the country. We may have broken some stereotypes. And even though we may not have made any money with the ads, we did not lose any, because we paid for it by saving money elsewhere. And for that, the credit goes to the staff, because they accepted to travel, the low-cost seat sale fares and book ahead of time, and not necessarily the best travel times either. Everything to make the dream happen. And I think that is a testament to the strength of APTN, which is its people.
Kia ora. Congratulations. I think that's one of the most wonderful stories that I've heard, and the actualisation of something so huge, and the commitment of the people, and it resonates really well with a few of us oldies around here when it comes to the commitment of the people for the languages. And I wish we'd have known that it was broadcast. I would have preferred to have received your broadcast than what we got tuned out in New Zealand by our major sportscasters. And then because it would have resonated more with us to have the various languages from our Indigenous brothers and sisters afar. And I think that's something that this consortium of Indigenous broadcasters should consider, and that is actually having those links and broadcasting, during those live broadcasts and out of the Olympics. It would be the greatest sports show in the world. And my heartfelt congratulations to you all. Well done. Tēnā koutou.
Thank you very much.
Kia ora, John Rose. I've just got two questions to ask. Firstly is the construction of the studio. Can you tell us a bit about why you went ahead and constructed this alternative studio with the requisite editing suites around it. And what sort of budget, or a percentage of your budget was the actual construction of the specific suite to deal with the Olympics?
Okay, the reason for the separate studio is that our studio is pretty small. I'm sure that Patrice will vouch that they now wish they had the new one. But the reality was there's just no way that we could do the broadcast that we did out of our regular studio. The set you saw there, that studio is about 4 times the size of our regular studio. And we needed that space. We needed that space because there were 3 different work areas in it. You had the main set with the wall of TVs behind that made you believe we were in Vancouver, because what we did is we shot time-lapse photography of Vancouver during a sunny day, a rainy day, evening, night, everything else. And according to the time of day, that's what played on there. So people thought we were in Vancouver. But the reason we needed so many suites was that everything was out of Winnipeg. We didn't build studios in Vancouver. It would have cost us an horrendous amount of money. By having people come to Winnipeg and do the voiceovers in Winnipeg, it became a much more manageable, much cheaper initiative, and it had the same results. All of our technical facilities are in Winnipeg, so we were receiving by satellite the feed from CTV in Vancouver, stripping off the audio, adding our own, and then beaming it back out. So that was happening for Aboriginal languages. English and French, we took their feeds as is, but what you saw in there too was that before every event, we had our own pre-game show, post-game show, with some of our own athletes, like you saw John Chabot, who used to play with the National Hockey League. We also had Mike Beauregard, who is a sports announcer that has worked for these individuals before, who is also First Nations. We had Métis people. It was all of our people doing the pre and post-game shows. Wanik Miller in Vancouver. And they were the ones who gave the commentary but made the story relevant to the community. They didn't speak to the same issues that if you were watching CTV, you would have heard their perspective on an event, their perspective on what the outcome may be, what have you. When you watched APTN, you heard a perspective that was very, very similar to what we would be looking at in the sport. As an example, in the biathlon or in other sports, cross-country skiing, they could relate that to ancestral hunting practices or what have you, and there were links there that you would never hear anywhere else. But the reason for the studio was to allow us the space to properly set up for these individuals. The cost for the studio itself, most of it, what you saw there, was rented except for the set. We rented everything else. It came in, it was installed about a week before the games, and the March 1 at 6 a.m. there were crews tearing the whole place down, and now the only thing that's left is part of the desk, the studio itself. Everything else is gone. We're considering now if we're going to use that space for the remainder of the lease and put maybe our new studio there and see if it works, but it was only a temporary arrangement anyways. But I'd say overall the cost, the biggest cost was the set. That was about $150,000 to have that set built, and it was no less spectacular than the one CTV built at $3.5 million, so I'm happy to say we looked as good. But at the same time, everything else was rented. So really what it cost us was about total for the infrastructure, the rented and the set was about $400,000 to $500,000. The biggest cost was in training for our sportscasters. That was $1 million cost. To fly them in on a few times, to have them trained, to lodge them, to accommodate them, and to pay them to do the broadcasts.
My final question is, hindsight's a wonderful thing. What are the lessons you've learned now doing it, and looking back now, are there areas you think you may have concentrated more on, or now that you've had this experience under your belt?
Well, I think it's still early. We're still going through everything that played out and what went well, what didn't quite go as well. Certainly one of the things that I would probably look at doing differently is we had crews in Vancouver which didn't get a chance to work together before because we hired contract people. We had some of our staff, and we put them together on an immediate basis that they had to start delivering, but they'd never worked together. So if I do this again, and I hope to do it again in 2012, I will bring these people together a week or two before so that they know each other and they can learn to work together, because it took them the first few days of the Olympics to pick up their speed and get to understand each other, work together and iron out any differences. And that showed. That showed on air a bit, and it showed in some of the tensions between staff that didn't need to happen. But in hindsight, that's probably right now the first thing that comes to mind.
Kia ora.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maraus from TITV. 看到 APTN 举办这个盛大的盛会，其实给其他的电视台很大的鼓励。那我要问几个问题之前，就是我们在台湾，原是我们也会在每一年举办全国的原住民的基层少棒的比赛。
a baseball competition, and we use our mother tongues to report it. So comparing with the regular broadcasters, actually we are more humorous, and we can connect better with the tribes. So I'm wondering, after you, I'm thinking that your achievement actually is a great excitement, encouragement for us.
体育的赛事，那其实会用到很多的外来语。
My question is that when we are reporting, we use a lot of borrowed language.
或者在加拿大
And
原住
I'm
民内部怎
wondering,
么去看
in
外来语
you are in
被
APTN
使用
and
在转播里
what
面，或是在
what are your views
直播
on
里面
using borrowed
最后我
language
想要
in reporting,
再
broadcasting?
请教，就是做这件事在 APTN 是不是有做了一些特别更多的
And
方
also,
法
I would like
去
to
处理
know
跟
if
部落
you
的
adopted
连接
other methods
这
to
几件事
connect
情
to
我想要请教
the
谢谢
tribes in Canada before you broadcasted the events.
因为这件事做了什么样的配合跟合作？
What kinds of coordination you have to do with tribes in Canada?
Okay. Okay. If I understand your question correctly, I guess the key way we communicate with the community and trying to make sure that they relate to this is what we did. We tried to choose the languages in which we have the most language speakers for these events. The 8 languages that were chosen were the ones that had still the most language speakers and that had the best possibility for us to be able to find people who could do the language. Interestingly enough, and I think that probably speaks to your point, members of those communities, and I'll take, let's say, for example, just Cree speakers, some of the Cree speakers who have lost the language, were somewhat disappointed that we didn't have English subtitles so that they could actually listen to their language, but they can't understand it anymore, and understand by reading the subtitles. But that would have been too much of a challenge for us to do in the time we had, and with the difficulty we had in finding people. Our goal next time will be to have subtitles in English when we have Aboriginal language, but as closed caption, allowing people who only want to hear it not be bothered by the captioning, to turn it off or on if they want to watch it. So that was the big challenge of the communities. The rest, like I say, we did not get, to my knowledge, a negative reaction from Canada, from any individual saying, why are those languages there? Why isn't it in English so I can understand this thing too? Or French, or one of those 2 languages. We did not get that. In fact, we had people watching who didn't understand it because they actually wanted to watch it and they didn't care about the language, or they were just interested in getting they didn't want to hear what usually is said on the sports network, which is often repetitious or it's pretty well the same type of fare. Some of them just said it was interesting, it was great to actually not have to bother about what's being said, but just watch the event and live it and feel the intensity through the comments, even though we couldn't understand them. So that is, there are many ways to deal with the point you're raising, but I think this is the first one that comes to mind. And I've been given the hook. Thank you very much.
Sean, do you like the surprise? Do you like the surprise of having an extra QA session? Not my suitcase. Okay. Well, we love Canada. Here is another surprise. We'll take a break until 3:30, so I can have a proper introduction for Mr. Campbell. Please delete the previous part. Thank you very much. Okay. Please be back at 3:20. And can we have our panelists in the next station to the room, back in the backstage? Jim. Okay. Can we have our panelists in the next session? Jim, Tanya, Dr. Huang Dongqiu, Dr. Guo Liangwen, Donald Campbell.